Okay guys, thank you so much for coming. I think we'll just get started right now, and if people do come in, we can go back and help them later on. But this is me, I'm Emerson. Thank you so much for coming today, guys. We're going to try to get you all sorted out with a lot of the general sort of information, timelines, differences between personal statements, all that classic stuff, and we'll save time at the end for any more specific questions that you might have. We'll try to make it as clear and straightforward as possible for you guys. And I'll try to use my left hand to go forward. Yes, okay. So basic questions that a lot of people have. You know, what are these things? And then we'll get into more specific stuff like how do I choose my schools? What schools can I choose? You know, and the processes for that. Personal statements, of course. And then the actual process and a lot of the deadlines. So pretty much the order of what we'll do here. So essentially, if you look at some of the numbers for these things, there really are no other, comparatively similar processes. These online portals for the US, for the UK, are the most dominant in the whole world. If you look over here, the US, just before November 1st, 1.5 million different applications. And November 1st is a key date that we'll talk about later, because essentially that's the early admissions deadline. So a lot of people rush on October 31st at midnight. I think something like 250,000 applications just on October 31st. Everybody stays up late and gets in. But the UK, I mean, obviously fewer school choices as far as, just land mass and that sort of thing, but hundreds of thousands of people applying each and every year. And what we see are some of the numbers, and we get the importance of trying to do these applications really well, not only meeting the expectations, but also sort of exceeding them. UCLA, we were just talking about UCLA, California, beautiful campus, record-breaking 100,000+ applications last year, and the acceptance rates are just a fraction of that, with Stanford being sort of an infamous example. Even legacy students, families have trouble, getting into some of these places. So what we want to really look at today is how to separate yourself from the other applicants in these giant pools of students. And you might recognize a lot of these names. These are kind of the big picture names. University of Virginia in there as well. One of the public Ivies in the US, totaling their numbers a little less than even Oxford. So whether you've heard of some of these places or not, we're looking at 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 students being accepted globally, right? Because basically everybody's trying to go to the same places. And as parents and students in Hong Kong, this is no real news for you guys, maybe, right? I can't tell you how many times I hear Columbia. Columbia is my number one choice. Okay, great. And I'm going to increase my potential by doing early decision. I'm going to go to Columbia. Yeah, I mean, there are so many different methods and pathways to attending some of these places, but when you look at the Ivy League on the US side, or you look at the Russell Group on the UK side, 14 out of the top 50 in the planet are from these two groups. And it just goes to show the sort of competitive nature among them. So, one of the things that I want to share with you guys today and talk more in detail about is, okay, look, how can we get into these places? How can we, make ourselves distinctive from the crowd? But also how to consider a more comprehensive school list that fits you appropriately and still accomplishes all of your sort of future goals, okay, without only considering the go-to Ivy Leagues, the most popular Russell Group schools. So we're gonna look at some different school profiles today and consider how to choose among them. And this is gonna be our checklist. and this will take you right through for some of the things that you need to do, in this order. Understanding the applications, knowing what you can and can't do, knowing what you can get away with. For students, for you guys, your schools and not have to completely rely on your school counselor, right? And obviously these are, professionals who are doing their job, but, just want to make sure that we illustrate everything clearly. There's amazing reaches from the Russell Group, from the Ivy League, but a more comprehensive list. And then all those personal statements and essays that you actually have to do in the deadlines before you submit and accept. And then when you need to submit these, when you need to accept them, and for some people, what happens if I don't want to accept them? For example, in an early decision situation, can I get out of it? Can I ignore my early decision and accept another school? Okay. And at the end of this thing, you see Einstein over there hanging out. At the end of this thing, I want you guys to feel really confident and walk away from today really understanding everything that you need to do. I think the way that this thing goes is it's all about, again, knowing the applications and being yourself. A lot of the times when people say, like, oh, I've got the secrets to the application, it's really just sort of illustrating the basics and making sure that you understand the do's and the don'ts, and that's simply it. And for the most part, it does take a little bit of time, so you want to prepare in advance, of course. But it's not open heart surgery, it's not brain surgery, it's a lot more straightforward than you might imagine, and I want to share all those things with you in a very clear way so that you guys feel good about it. So here is basically everything that you guys need to know for these two applications. And I will, if you guys do want to stay and talk a little bit more about Hong Kong applications or even Australian applications, I'm happy to do that. But to include Australian applications in this process, or to include Australia, would take a lot more of your time today. So let's start off with the formats. So both of these are basically your guides, your full support systems for everything that you need to do for meeting the basic requirements, choosing your schools, submitting everything. For the US side, for the Common App, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of unis in the US. Okay, so you're really going to get practically everybody in there. There are smaller liberal arts colleges where you might need to apply directly. But for the most part, this is everybody from top to bottom, the biggest public schools, the elitist private schools, and all that sort of stuff. But one of the great things about the US side is you can do as many of these as you want, as many as you can actually handle. There's really no, the schools, your schools, right, your school counselors will help you do 10 of them. Okay, we're going to talk more about that a little bit later with limitations within your school. And again, every school counselor has 50 more students that they need to deal with. So they do try to put a limit on these things. But technically, we're going to look at ways like the California system. You'll get way more than just one school for one application, and so on and so forth. Okay. Another great thing about the US side, especially for young people, young adults, asking someone to decide their future at age 16, 17, 18 can be a pretty tough task. So something about the US that a lot of people do enjoy is that you can be undecided at the moment. You can go in to your application process, to your schools, and actually choose undeclared, within the university. And then most schools will make you actually choose something by your, just before your third year, your junior year, and make sure you meet all those requirements. But at the beginning, you don't need to actually state anything. The main thing a lot of people do worry about and actually use as an excuse to maybe avoid applying to the US is those extra tests. Okay, so for a lot of people in the industry, I think in the education industry, and if you're doing your research and stuff like that, some of the big name schools like U-Chicago and these kind of top schools, there is a general trend of shifting away from accepting or demanding ACTs and SAT scores, okay? For the vast majority, however, though, you do actually need some sort of standardized test in SAT and ACT, but check your school admissions. Check your school admissions. The boards can declare whether they don't really mind, okay? But we're not going to get too much into the standardized test situation today. If you do have questions, though, I'm happy to sort of answer those questions, especially about subject tests, choosing your subject tests, and what those requirements might be. For the UK, a little bit different. It's 99% the UK. In the last couple of years, they have been trying to open up and form individual partnerships with some European schools. You know, you might look into Holland, the Netherlands rather, and see one school there, here or there, but not really. And if you're looking into European unis, you're most likely going to have to apply directly to the schools. But for the UK, this is it. This is the UCAS. And there is a limit, so you kind of see that first major difference between these two. There are 5 schools or courses. So when I say 5 applications total, the UCAS is technically one application. Okay, it's just one big thing. But this is something that we were talking about the other day. You can really only choose 5 courses. 5 courses. So let's say that I wanted to go to UCL, right? I want to go to UCL, but I'm looking at 2 different courses in UCL. That would count as 2 applications. Okay, so it's not 5 different schools and I can apply to everything at those 5 different schools. It's 5 different courses total. And in those, and that sort of leads right into here, you have to actually choose those courses, declare your course of study, and that's going to affect, we'll see that later, that's going to affect your personal statements and potentially your recommendations, potentially your higher levels that you choose. Because in the UK, even though there aren't admissions tests required, there are academic requirements. I know you're about to graduate from, complete your GCSEs. It's a very exciting time. You have to have when you get into your A-levels, you have to have a certain number of A stars or these sorts of things. And the UK is as we're going to see in the more specific details later. On the whole, the UK is a lot more academically focused, and this is what people really admire. The professionalism and focus of the UK system. Whereas the US system, it's a little bit more mad. There are a lot more things to consider outside of academics that they use to define your character and really build that kind of profile. So we're going to get into that later. But that's essentially the formats. So we'll talk more about selecting schools. Classic safety target reach approach. I mean, this is the basics. And I know some of you guys talking with you earlier are looking for, how do I just generally approach? What are some things that I need to think about? And for some seasoned veterans or parents that may have been through this in the past, this might be common sense, but I include this word refining for a reason. As you go through this process, even maybe beginning now, you might have some schools in mind that you might want to go to. I know you're visiting campuses and these sorts of things, but it is sort of something that does evolve. And your school list at the beginning of junior year, or even at the beginning of senior year, depending on how your grades come in and how you do on some of the tests, if you do the SAT or whatever, might continue to evolve. So you really want to make sure that you have an open mind about how your list evolves and how you refine those choices going into your final applications. And we'll talk more about specific characteristics of schools and some things that I would highly recommend you take a look at. But in general, what actually is a safety? How do you define a safety, a target, and a reach? And they kind of come down to 3 major things: the academics, the confidence that you feel, and then how you sort of feel about those choices personally and as a student. Okay, so safeties obviously are going to be way above the averages. There are so many statistics that you can look at. The data are always published as soon as possible. The universities do like to make all that information public to help not only their staff and their admissions boards, but also students make the right decisions. And your confidence should be very high. But something I want to talk about with the safeties. A lot of people kind of think of safeties as like, okay, all right, I guess I'm going here. This is kind of like, the consolation prize. But what you want to do is actually take the time. We were talking about those Ivy League schools, those Russell Group schools, is take the time to actually research schools that, and we'll look again at this later, but that fit you in a way that you're not only are they acceptable, but they're verging on exciting. There's something that, when the letter comes, it puts a smile on your face. It's not just like, okay, here it is. So you want to be excited about the college process. The targets, of course you're going to be excited to go. These should be the ones that, maybe as a kid, you met somebody who went there, you saw a t-shirt, or you went to a basketball game, or you visited the campus on vacation, or something like this. And these are the ones you can't wait to be a part of. But you're not exactly sure, how you're going to compare. You fall within the range, but the ranges are ranges for a reason. People are going to score a little bit higher, but also a little bit low. As far as the reaches and the confidence you feel getting into your reaches. Reaches are called reaches obviously for a reason, but I think the most important thing here is that your academics are fairly close. I mean, you should be, an arm's length away. Sometimes when we talk about reaches for IB students, you are maybe 2 or 3 points just outside. With your predicted grades, you're 2 or 3 points just outside. It's not 5 or 10 points, it's 2 or 3 points, and you've got a real potential of getting in. So again, make sure you think about these things, but also refine your list on a regular week. So we're talking about admissions counselors at school. And typically they'll support 10 of these university applications for a number of reasons. Mostly they're busy. A lot of them, depending on what your school is, they might actually be teaching classes. They might be admissions counselors, and that's their only job. But you need to make sure that you're on top of your application process. You're constantly talking with your admissions counselor. You're setting up meetings. Nice. I do the peanut butter ones like all the time. It's my favorite. I love them. But you're constantly. I know people actually. A lot of the students that I work with now have already been emailing and bothering, pestering their college counselors. You really want to make sure that you. I don't want to say steal your counselor's time, but that you do have a relationship with them. Okay, and you might share a counselor with your friends, your classmates, or things like this. Who cares? I mean, you've got to make sure that you that your admissions counselor wants to help you, right? It's not that you're just another one of the group that they have to do. Okay, here's your name on the list. Be involved and have conversations. Get the WhatsApp number of your counselor if you can at school, emails, meet in person, that sort of thing. But with these 10, what can you do? Well, with the UCAS, that actually counts as one rec. So if you're only considering the UK, it's very straightforward. You don't really need to worry about your choices. One application actually counts as all those schools. Similarly with the University of California, there are 9 total schools in UCal. So if you're thinking about your reaches, your targets, your safeties, these are all wrapped up in one. I mean, within those 5 UCAS, you kind of want to make sure you have those reaches, those targets, those safeties. And the same for Cal. A lot of people look for Cal. It's Berkeley. Berkeley's actually within that system. UCLA is definitely one of those top schools, as we saw, so many application numbers. But even some of the other ones are getting surprisingly competitive. I mean, you would be surprised. Yeah, UC San Diego is becoming increasingly competitive. We saw a lot of students in Hong Kong last year, and you see stories about this in the newspaper and within parent and student communities. UCSD was my safety school. San Diego was my safety school, and I didn't get in. Oh my God, what do I do now? I mean, you really want to make sure that you do your research and talk to somebody about this, because even some of the schools that might not have the international brand that people are looking for in Hong Kong, they are actually seeing record-breaking numbers. You don't have, by the way, just a quick thing, you don't have to choose all 9 for Cal, but I mean, why not? It doesn't really make any sense not to. It's a click of a button. I was actually doing this the other day with a student. Before UCal, all you do is you just have to select whether you want to declare. You can choose different majors for each individual one. And I think we did that whole thing. We had been talking for a long time, but the clicking process takes 10 minutes of your time. So you do have to declare or undeclare majors for each individual one, but it's super easy and it's all part of one application. So the other 8 is why we're kind of here. What do you do with these other 8s? And how do you choose your sort of personal combination for these other 8? Let's get into it. Here are some things that I constantly hear, what are some concerns, what are the questions typically about, and some of the more, maybe some things that you wouldn't initially think of when you're choosing your school. So something that you want to look at is obviously location. Now I think students coming out of Hong Kong, I mean, we're used to 24-hour grocery stores, taxis are everywhere, you can walk anywhere you want to go, all this sort of stuff. It's a big city, and it's one of those sort of global places, that you live. And anybody who's actually been to many of the locations in the States are really, really shocked by the fact that it's quiet. You can hear bugs, you can hear frogs, these sorts of things. And for some people, that's just bliss. That's happened. Wow, I didn't really. I went to a lot of Hong Kongers recently come back from the Cornell University summer camps, and I hear both sides. Like, wow, it was so. I could see the stars, the sky, all this sort of stuff. It was really amazing. Or I didn't realize that Ithaca, New York, wasn't really near New York City. They don't realize how big New York actually is, and it's tough. It's a tough switch coming from Hong Kong. Location also has to do with networking potential. So even if you're in London, even if you're looking at the UK, I mean, are you in central London? Warwick University, Durham, some of these big brands, these tough schools, they do have great alumni networks and these sorts of things, but you won't exactly be in the mix of the city. You want to do maybe a little bit more planning for your internships or professional career opportunities and things like that. So location is a big one. Campus culture, sort of in contrast to the actual location itself, is kind of what you would call the actual vibe that you get on campus. And this varies. It's the personality of the campus. It's the personality of the student body at large. And for anybody who's ever actually gone on campus visits, this is one of the main things that they do try to illustrate to you. They do really try to show you is, what kind of personality, what kind of culture do they actually have on campus. You're going to be away from family, this sort of thing. You're going to be on your own, these sorts of things, growing up and stuff. Are you going to be happy in this community? It's going to be your home. So something to consider. Obviously, academic difficulty. I mean, I don't really need to, tell you guys about this one. But I think the one thing that I would add about this is that you want to consider not only the academic difficulty of the overall school, but also the specific program that you're going into. So for example, for the US, you know, you might have a brand name school that you're really interested in, but some of the schools might be a lot harder to get into than others. You know, you look at UPenn. Everybody knows Wharton. Everybody knows Wharton. That is one of the hardest schools to get into for an individual college in the US, right? But are you just trying to get your foot in the door and get into UPenn with maybe an easier program, something like this? So you want to think about the academic difficulty of not just the uni itself, but your specific area of study and those programs offer. Do they offer the things that you're looking for specifically? But then again, the brand and where this is going to take you personally, professionally, afterwards. I think, you know, from an international community here in Hong Kong, a lot of people are looking for those top brands. But if you are staying in the UK, I mean, people, you know, I say places like Warwick or Durham in the UK, those are really, really well respected, but maybe a little bit more so actually in the UK and in England, more immediately noticeable than in Hong Kong. And it's the same for a lot of the US unis as well. While some people in Hong Kong may not have heard of, let's say, the University of Virginia, it is actually one of the toughest schools to get into in the States, and it's considered one of those public Ivies, along with a few others. But then I think, you know, you look at the person in the mirror, and you think about what you actually want. And this is one of the hardest things, I think, for everybody. You know, what do you actually want to, where do you want to go? Is it the US, is it the UK? What do you want to study? And where do you want to spend the next few years of your life? And I mean, that really shouldn't be taken too lightly. It is a real consideration. You don't want to end up someplace solely because of the brand. You want to actually be happy and be excited about going. So let's take a look at a couple of schools and do a comparison. So what we're going to do, I'll just show you guys really quick. I'll look at two different schools. NYU. Have you guys heard of? You guys know NYU? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So NYU, one of those really popular schools. And then we're going to also look. I'll show you really quickly at a school called William and Mary. And we're going to, and you may or may not have heard of this school, William and Mary, but I've chosen it. Yes. But I've chosen it as sort of a comparison to NYU, and we're going to look at these two sort of side by side. And by the way, for anybody interested in the UK, guys, you can do the same exact thing with the UK. Okay, I just, you know, for sake of demonstration, I've just chosen these two from the US, but you can easily do this sort of comparison with King's College London and LSE, or you know, Birmingham and Warwick, or wherever you choose. And these are the things, you know, I would recommend for everybody to kind of put together these. You know, go to Log On, buy a cool notebook, get some highlighters and some colored pencils, and have fun with it. You know, make this entire process fun for you, where you're really exploring it, and it's actually something that you're excited about. So what we got here is kind of a ranking that may change for each. Some of these things might change for individual people, but we'll look at some of these rankings based on the criteria we just talked about, some of the key stats, and then kind of like just four little extras that you might look for individual schools. So NYU, to persevere and excel, not just to persevere, but both. Location, obviously, right in the heart of New York City. You've got Washington Square Park. You've got a million really amazing places to live. You know, they might be expensive, but it's one of those global cities, much like Hong Kong. Internship opportunities, all of this different stuff. It's a really easy flight, coming and going. You know, if you're trying to come back for a quick visit, it's easy. It's really simple. But campus culture. For anybody who's actually visited NYU, they're really friendly people, and they'll share with you the fact that NYU's mascot is actually the Bobcats, and the students are called Violets, and you know, all this kind of cool information. But when I say campus culture, it is kind of a big city. And one of the problems with schools in a big city is you're less of a student community, and you're more of another face in the crowd. You're just another person walking the streets of New York. Of course, there are going to be clubs, activities, these sorts of things, but you're studying alongside people who are just doing their everyday job, doing their everyday routine, so you don't really get that same sense of just like a really tight-knit campus culture, really tight-knit college community that you will get in places that have, maybe a more suburban environment, campus culture. Obviously, it's really tough to get in. Some of the rankings that I've got here from US News and stuff puts Stern, if you guys know Stern, as within the top 5 business schools in the country. So the academics are pretty tough. Right now, ranked number 27. As far as these grades, I mean, these are above average. But with the academics, what I'll show you about NYU that is different from the next school, William & Mary, they don't really care too much about the GPA. They don't care as much about the GPA. And for parents and students, if you guys are looking into your schools, again, US or UK, it doesn't really matter, what you want to think about is how much they really value the actual GPA and where that rests within the sort of pantheon of your application, right? Is the personal statement far more valuable for them? Do they weigh the SAT, ACT much more? Or is it actually the GPA? Because the GPA is kind of like over 4 years. It's a longer process, and it kind of gives your character a little bit more development. Versus, I took the ACT one weekend and I got this score, right? It's a little bit different there. As far as the programs offered, the only thing that is maybe holding this back from 1 star is that they don't really, they can't really compete with a lot of the STEM kind of stuff. I mean, you look at places like MIT or Caltech or these sort of, when you're a 5-minute walk from NASA, it's a little bit different. But they do have tons of different programs to offer. The brand is amazing. But again, this is a very personal thing. And I only put this at 2 stars because I was talking to somebody the other day, a student the other day, about how she went to NYU and she thought it was really similar to Hong Kong in many ways. And for her, she was looking for something a little bit lighter, a little bit more suburban, these sorts of things. So this might be 5 stars for you, going to NYU or going to UCL or whatever it is. But just make sure you kind of think of these things and do your own rating system. Put these cards together, keep a notebook. But for mom and dad, don't forget about the numbers, right? As well, the tuition costs. Let's just casually slide in the massive amounts of tuition costs in the U.S. And I think before we move on, I'll show you this next one. 47 versus 38. For anybody looking into the UK, it's a lot different, especially if you have a UK passport. For a UK passport, it's under £10,000. And even if you don't have a UK passport, it's just a little over £10,000. So if pricing is something that you do want to consider, guys, I mean, that's a very serious thing. The UK on the whole is much, much cheaper than the education bubble that's growing in the US. I mean, it's massive. Well, let's take a look at some of the similarities and differences between these 2 schools. So I've chosen William & Mary, one, because it is, I didn't include it here, it's the 2nd oldest school in all of America. Anybody know the oldest one is actually Harvard. Harvard University. Harvard is the oldest school in America, and that's, it's why it's got so much prestige and all this sort of stuff. But William & Mary is the 2nd oldest school. Tons of US presidents coming out of this school. Has anybody heard of William & Mary before just now? No, not at all, okay? And you look at some of the factors. Well, one of the reasons is location. This is in Williamsburg, Virginia. And I know, oh hey, do you mind closing that door? This is in Williamsburg, Virginia, which is one of the most historic districts. It's right near the first colony, the first US colony. It's a short drive from where Pocahontas, if you've ever seen any of those movies or stories, grew up and was born. But it's sort of in the middle of nowhere compared to NYU, okay? You know, if you're interested in getting into politics, working in Washington, D.C., this location might actually go up for you, right? But compared to New York, it's not that much. However, you'll look at the campus culture. We've got these guys ranked, Princeton Review has these guys ranked at the second happiest students in all of America. They're a really tight bunch. They love going to school here. The school takes great care of them. The facilities are excellent, and the quality of life is very, very high. So that might actually be one of the determining factors. And as far as academics go, take a look at this. Not only are these test scores equal to NYU, but they actually value the GPA much more than NYU as well. So by the numbers, this is actually, in many ways, a much tougher school to get into. And for people in the US, this brand is amazing. You know, but internationally, you might not have that international brand coming into Hong Kong. But again, it might be exactly what you're looking for. So try to consider all these things, guys. You know, and I know that your friends, family members, you know, we might get into a little competition. And where are you going? Where are you going to be when you grow up? These sorts of things. These are real questions. You know, these are serious questions, and obviously you want to plan these sorts of things. But any college counselors that you work with are going to start to give you options that you may not have heard of. Do your research and see how they sort of, or where they rest within, you know, the US and within the UK. Cool. Okay. Moving forward. So for some of you, you might even be considering what, not just what school, but what country do I even choose? So that's one of the things that I want to make sure is very clear here today, with some of the differences between the lifestyles, what it's like to go to these schools, to attend these universities. I did my undergrad in the US and I did my grad in the UK, and so I've kind of got like a little bit of both going on, and I can give you not only my personal experience, but what a lot of different people say, having come out of these situations on the whole. So, you know, you've got the UCLA brewing here, having a good time. Again, the campus atmosphere for the US, when I say that they've got school spirit from head to toe, one of the things that you'll notice about going to school in the US is that everybody's really, really into going to their school. Okay, they really get pumped up about it. I was joking with one of the dads that I've been working with, and he went into UCLA with his family, his daughter that I have class with, and he went into the UCLA bookstore and he started just buying. He was amazed. The UCLA bookstore has everything you could possibly imagine with the UCLA brand on it. I think he bought a couple of lawn chairs. He just bought chairs with like UCLA on it. You'd be surprised. You'll see people walking the campus head to toe UCLA gear or Virginia Tech gear or whatever the school is. They'll be covered in it. And even when you graduate, adults, you know, families, moms and dads, they'll say proud mom of a UVA Cavalier. You know, people will have their babies in baby clothing for these universities. There's such a high degree of pride associated with US universities because of those atmospheres that are a part of your life for so long. So it really is a lot more, I guess I would say exuberant. It's a lot more lively. And again, for central London schools, similar to NYU, like we were saying, you're just kind of another face in the crowd. You know, you might have your student communities, but on the whole, for the vast majority of schools, they're really into it. And the rivalries are intense. You know, you'll even see people in communities, their homes will have flags and all this sort of school swag, all the school gear, well after graduation. There are alumni programs. I still get emails. Obviously, they're asking for donations from time to time. But they have so many different events, homecoming events, involving sports activities and stuff like this. And sports are huge too. Anybody actually go to a US sporting events, basketball game, baseball game, football game? Yeah. It's sort of like, imagine like, or even in the UK, if you go to a Premier League game. Imagine in the US, it's a Premier League size stadium, or even bigger. for practically every major college. Okay, and this is every single weekend, every single weekend during football season, basketball season. So that spirit kind of continues, and there will be barbecues. There will be this sort of thing week in and week out to really make sure that there's a lot of social interaction. Now, I'll just say something right now. We'll get into it a little bit later. Part of the interesting thing about this is it does actually get into your personal statements a little bit. They want to make sure that your personal statements are highly, highly personable. That you are somebody who can interact with different communities, different cultural groups, and all this sort of stuff. That you're just sort of a, fun person because it is really, really social. Something else that's really interesting that I always enjoy talking to people about is the meal plans. No joke. They actually do. They take this very seriously. There will be ranking systems for the meal plans. I'm talking about some schools having unlimited meal plans. It's not cheap, but unlimited meal plans where you can get lobsters, steaks. This is very serious, and you start to see where the tuition costs really go. I mean, the meal plans are insane. They'll have dining facilities that put Heist in place to shame. Okay, that's pathetic, right? Compared to some of these university dining programs. I can't stress this enough. And for anybody who's been to the U.S., the U.S. portions. You're gonna have some fun. You're gonna get some good food on a U.S. campus. Other than that, I think one of the major things about campus life, let's say worst comes to worst, emergency situation, it's just not a good fit for you. Leave. Change. You can change majors, you can change schools. It is incredibly easy for you to kind of just pick up your gear and go. And there's no real love lost. It is sort of completely acceptable. The university will be very helpful with transferring all your credits and making sure the process is smooth. You're not on your own at all. And even within the UCs, because it's all part of one college, it's super easy to actually just go to another UC. And I'll tell you something, that I tell everybody coming out of high school. They actually value students who have survived a semester or two in college and gotten decent grades in college. They prefer those grades over high school grades because you're away from your family, you're away from your support system, and you've actually gotten good grades on your own. A lot of people fail out for a number of different reasons, right? So it is quite easy to transfer, worst comes to worst. But let's take a look at the UK. So I think something we were saying earlier, it is more academically focused, a very professional campus atmosphere. Everybody is, they're dressed very nicely. They're not exactly wearing, the school bookstores are, if they exist, they're very, very small. Really the only people who wear like the Oxford or Cambridge shirts are like tourists, right? That's pretty much the deal. So you'll see people who are very professional, very focused, and you do get that vibe. And that's what a lot of people are looking for, right? I want to go here, I want to learn. I want to become a specialist, I want to become a professional, and I want to get a really good job as soon as possible. And that's why there's only three years. You're going to learn this stuff, you're going to learn the theory, you're going to get out and you're going to practice. Okay? Compared to the US as well, and this actually does sort of go into the tuition cost. I was saying the tuition costs are a lot lower. There are tons of holidays. For Easter, for example, I think you guys might be familiar with this out in Hong Kong. Easter, I think they get 6 months off for Easter. It's not that much, but they get an entire month off for Easter. You don't even really start. Some of the programs don't even start until October. I actually calculated it one time with some undergrad friends, and all in all, even though it's 3 years, you're actually only physically attending classes for a year and a half. Okay, it's actually not that much. This system, when you break it down, they give you a lot more personal study time, which, maybe that's your style, that's what you're looking for. They want you to be able to manage your time, go to the library, and get it done. The US does a lot more, you get the classes, the courses, attendance is required, that sort of thing. Whereas here, you're really not in class all that long. And a lot of people use this for travel time, that sort of stuff. So it's actually quite nice. Then of course the low tuition, guys, I can't stress this enough. Never mind healthcare. As a student, I can tell you that you do get signed up for the NHS. You do get the benefits of the National Health Service of the UK. So anytime you're sick, anything, even an emergency, you can just go right into either the school's medical center or into see a GP, and you are covered as well. So that's all included in tuition, which is really, really nice. And then the brands. I mean, the US does compete with a lot of the UK brands, but when you look at, Oxford, Cambridge, when you look at, the LSEs and some of those Russell Group schools, taking those degrees out to Hong Kong or out in the world, it is sometimes it's tough to beat, right? So I think you really have some of the oldest universities in the entire world, including Edinburgh, which a lot of people forget part of the Russell Group. And on top of that, if you are looking into more specific programs like medicine or law, you will have to complete vocational kind of programs. You can't just get out of class and then go into the courtroom and wear a wig and pound a gavel or something like this. That's not exactly how it works. But you will be able to actually get into more vocational training to become a solicitor or a barrister faster than the US. For the US, you have to go to a separate law school for grad school. So a lot to love about the UK as well. But personal statements, and I know that you guys are looking very specifically into this. This is probably one of the most visible differences in these two applications. So for both cases, everywhere you apply reads it. So there's one sort of overarching personal statement. One overarching personal statement that everybody will get to read. So for these applications, you don't want to name schools exactly. You don't want to say oh, I'm excited about going to King's College, but I'm also applying to 4 other places. Don't do that, right? So everyone's going to read it. Essentially, the word limit or character limit is about the same, so that's not really an issue. But the big difference is that the US, you actually get to choose what you talk about. Okay, there are question choices, and you actually choose one of those questions. And you say, this is the one that I'm doing, and then you write your personal statement, personal essay based on that. Whereas the UK, it's just one prompt. Give us your personal statement. That's it. For the US, you might also need supplementary essays. 99% of the colleges will ask you, why Boston University? Why Brown? Why Columbia? These sorts of things. There will usually be additional ones too. So as far as your time and your planning, this takes much more time. So much more time, okay? Depending on the schools that you choose. Whereas this one, all of the students that I'm working with, we've already actually got a nice draft going into September, right? The UCAS isn't even officially open for submissions yet, but we already have this one draft because it's just the one. So that's the main difference in those formats. But let's take a look at the US. So if you're planning on doing the US and you want to write a personal statement, personal essay, these are not what the actual questions are, but I've sort of broken them down into a simplified way of thinking about them. And so you can kind of see some of the choices here. But just taking a look at them, if you look at number 5, has there been any moment of growth in your life? Okay, so this is kind of just a very personal moment. And the way that you define growth and the way that you sort of illustrate that growth can be very, very personal. There's no real one definition, of growth or of an obstacle or what is captivating. So, you see these choices and you try to pick the one that you can elaborate on the most, the one that really illustrates your character. As far as the key tips for each of these, I would just say the main ones to think of are keep it informal. So I can tell you what does that actually mean, keep it informal? Your tone, your voice. use slang, you know, use fun language that demonstrates your character. Don't be, you know, a boring old sort of robot with the sentences you create. You know, have fun, guys. But it also means the structures. Think of the structure of this as kind of like a blog or a magazine article. You do not need complete sentences. You can just have a one-word sentence. You can have a paragraph break. You can have punctuation all over the place. You can use hashtags. You know, this, you can, all this sort of stuff. So when I say keep it informal, it's mainly your voice, your vocabulary, and that comes from vocabulary, but also the structures and these sorts of things too. And be entertaining. You know, when we say, what's the obstacle been? This could have been a very serious obstacle for you. This could have been a major difficulty that you somewhat overcame. And that can be a serious tone. Ultimately, however, you do want to keep this sort of lighthearted, right? And you do want to show that this hasn't sort of, you know, weighed you down and burdened you forever, right? I mean, you want to have it be uplifting, and try to get in some you know, comedic angles, some jokes if possible, you know, in good taste and all that sort of stuff. That really does show your voice. The last thing I would say for this is branding yourself. What? You know, how you brand yourself? Have like a key moment in your essay somewhere. You want to be able to say, for the admissions guys, they're going to have a stack of applications, and they're going to meet about these applications, and there's a process. And when they say like, hey, which ones did you like? Well, you want to be able to say like the one with the shark battle, you know, or something like this. I worked with a student who actually did get into a shark, no joke, a shark battle where he actually had to punch a shark, save his life, and he ended up going to Berkeley with this essay. It was a really sort of intense experience. You know, have something that you, the admissions guys, can say, what was that one? Oh, the shark battle one. Like, we definitely got to keep that one in here. Another student I know who was applying to, in Hong Kong actually, who was applying to University of San Diego. He wanted to go to San Diego for a marine biology program. And he had an internship salvaging stuff in Victoria Harbor. And he's actually, you know, scuba diving and going down, and they've got, you know, all these different processes and procedures, and it's really intense stuff. But we were talking about his personal statement. I was like, tell me more about this. And just sort of casually, after like, you know, hours of conversation, he mentioned the dolphins. It's like, oh, I forgot. Okay, so what is it like with the dolphins down there? Oh, well, they try to kill me every second they can. Yeah, the dolphins will try to unplug his air hose. Right, but they're actually protected by the Hong Kong government. So you've got these dolphins that are literally trying to, you know, rip out your air hoses and get you out of their territory while you're doing intense salvaging work, but you can't touch them because it's actually a very major crime. And that's sort of like a branding moment, right? These are the things that you want to have where it illustrates your skills, your ability, your personality, your character, but also it's something that people will remember about you. You know, these are intense examples, but everybody has something that is personally intense to them, and I'm sure that you guys can find it with a little help. So here is one that Johns Hopkins has actually recently released. Students and schools can choose to make this information public, and these are available, guys. You know, from different schools and unis to give you an idea. So I'm not asking you to read the whole thing for homework or something like that, but I would say take a look in general at some of the bold words. You'll immediately notice the structure. Okay, I mean, look how short these sentences are. Look at the punctuation. It's broken up nicely, clearly, but also just very casually and informally. Some of the language, it's incredibly descriptive. There's lots of, you know, if you remember your high school English classes, guys, imagery, right? It's all about the imagery, you know, making sure you get those sights and sounds. In this case, this was by a young lady named Stephanie, who wrote her experience about defining superheroes. And as a kid, she always thought that she would, have her angel wings and battle demons with katanas and stop crime. But later on, she sort of shifted her definition, and she realized, like, hey, listen, I'm not the typical definition of a superhero, but as you can see, I still want, I'm just a 17-year-old girl with a camera, but I still want to save the world. And for a lot of the unis, they know that you're 17 years old, 18 years old, right? But that doesn't mean you can't want to make a difference, that you can't really feel passionate about something or some sort of ideal or belief. And that's what they want to see. They want to still see that passion, that energy, that character, but they want to see it in a very descriptive, kind of like a storytelling narrative way. And this is what you want to do for your personal statement in a nutshell. So of course there's a lot to it, and I'm happy to answer more questions later. But here is the UK, the UCAS one. Everything is going to be essentially about your subject. Okay, it is less, about the descriptiveness. They actually want you to keep it a lot more formal. They don't really appreciate the jokes. You can even go into the UCAS website and they warn you, like, well, somebody might not find that funny. You could have a different sense of humor than that admissions counselor, right? So they do actually sort of warn you against, taking risks with jokes or comedic perspectives in your applications. It's still about you, but you with the subject. Everything's got to be sort of related or indicative of some sort of growth or advancement or dedication and enthusiasm for that subject. Okay, so, and we'll take a look at an example in a minute. As far as naming names, what I mean by this is actually, has there been an author, has there been a public figure that, really just impacted you? A TED Talk, an entrepreneur, a conservationist, anybody, name that name. What books have you actually read? What summer courses have you been to? What is your IB extended essay on? And I'll just give you, when you're looking at your EE here, my friend, you should probably write your extended essay on something somewhat related to what you want to study, especially if you're thinking about the UK, because that's another sort of, feather in your cap, where you can say, hey, listen, here's proof. Here's academic proof that I'm very interested in not only studying in the UK, but actually within this subject. So you have to declare your subject. And of course, the grammar, the structure is a lot more formal, so they are looking for that. The US, of course, you don't want to mess up, on purpose. You want to be creative with your structures, with your grammar, but here it is a lot more serious. So I'll give you a second to take a look at this. And it's by everybody's favorite author, which is anonymous. Yeah, sure. Just, you ready? Ready? No. Okay, great. So this is by everybody's favorite author, anonymous. Written all the great stuff throughout history. But this is a Russell Group application. And again, you're picking 5. You're not just choosing one school. So when you look at UCAS samples and personal statements, it's not like it's a sample for KCL or LSE or something like this. It's a sample for all 5 schools. But you can immediately notice the difference. If you look at the structures, it's a lot more like a school essay that you might see. It's a lot more like your typical introduction, body, conclusion. And guys, this is, neither of these are the complete essays. I don't want to make you sit here. You can't fit the whole thing on the screen, and it's messy. But you get an idea of the vibe. You get an idea of the characteristics of this. Geography is the study of the world. Geography involves natural disasters, ecosystems, globalization, and development. And coming out of my context, or coming out in many different contexts, overpopulation is a major issue within the field of geography. And this is something that I'm intensely interested in. Geography is not just rivers and volcanoes and these sorts of things where you fill baking soda in a science project and stuff. there are very serious issues within geography, and this is what I'm sort of interested in. And then what you see what this person does is that they actually start naming names. I'm a member of the Royal Geographic Society. In my extended project, I did this, and I studied this. I went to this person's talk, right? These sorts of things. So, if you are really looking for, as you finish your GCSEs, you really want to start to create lists of even just books, but also lectures you've been to, really unique places that you visited that have impacted this. And I think that the UCAS personal statement is the toughest for people who don't actually have a history involved with their subject. They've just sort of picked, I'm going to do economics. I'm going to study economics at LSE. Okay, well, you have absolutely no experience with economics whatsoever, and so we're going to have to make a lot of fluff in your application. We're going to have to invent almost, right? Without creating some story. We're going to have to really extrapolate some details. So when you're finishing your GCSEs, it's still not too late to start building up those summer experiences. Start reading authors that are related. You can even look at book lists for coursework. All the courses, they share their book lists, for all the unis. So start reading some of them. Attend lectures and do that stuff, because the worst UCAS public statement, personal statements, are the ones that have, clearly they've just decided on the subject like last night, and that really shows. So you want to try to have, lectures, and all those things that we really include in okay, in general, this is one of the biggest issues. Don't be cliche, guys. Don't be cliche. A lot of the things you will see, there's so many different cliche phrases and stuff like this, but for the UCAS, for the UK, or the US, the Common App, avoid, whether it's that informal, that formal structure, try to avoid, ever since I was a kid, really, when you were 5 years old, you were looking into fintech and behavioral economics. Wow, you must have been a protege of somebody, right? So this is, it's unbelievable when you say these things, yeah. So you really want to make sure you have these very direct statements, avoid cliches, and be as individual and as unique no matter what. I'll let you guys take a look at this for a minute, but these are essentially a lot of those key deadlines. There are some more specific ones, but these are the main ones. So the Common App already opened, and I was speaking earlier today about how this, we sort of arranged this talk to be in between. The Common App opened about 2 weeks ago, and then the UCAS is going to open for submissions in about 2 weeks as well. But really, you guys, at this point in senior year, if not before, right? I know a lot of you guys are juniors and stuff, it's fine. But going into summer of your senior year, this is when you really, you can create your accounts. You can't always submit stuff. You can create your accounts, add your phone number, your address, your email, stuff like that, and start drafting, start brainstorming and writing all this sort of stuff in advance, okay? For the US, it's a little bit later. Even if it's your early decision, that's that famous November 1st deadline. Whereas for the UK, especially if you want to do those Oxbridge ones, it's a lot earlier. So those Oxbridge applications are actually due middle of October. And for the Oxbridge, even if you're, they don't need the SAT, the ACT, but there are other essays, there are other tests and things that might be involved for your specific major. So this is a little bit of a push for people, especially as school is starting in September. Make sure. They won't do, you guys won't have to do the interviews in mid-October. The interviews will be much later, but you can see that the first real deadlines are much different. The ultimate deadline for 99% of the UCAS stuff is the middle of January. There are other ones, especially if you're getting into like dance or art, these sort of things. But for most of them, it is January 15th. For the ComMap deadlines, I'll just say this, it's 11:59 p.m. wherever your application says. Okay, so for example, it's 11:59. If your application is based out of Hong Kong, it's 11:59 p.m. Hong Kong. So make sure you guys are doing that. Okay, so it's wherever you actually sign up and complete your application. But they can be different. Some schools, it might be December, January, February. You can even communicate with the schools and push it later. You can do all sorts of things. But in a nutshell, it is 11:59. Okay, so we're coming to the end of this thing, and I want to take some questions from you guys and make sure that we get a chance to answer some of those key things. But here are some of the common questions, the frequently asked questions. For the US side, what if something is optional? Do I really, really need to do it? No, that's why it's optional, but guess what? You should, because it's just another way for you to differentiate yourself, to show your commitment to the school. Oh, there's another 650-word optional essay? You really want to go? Yeah, are you sure? Do it, right? Make sure that if there is something optional that the school offers, that you are doing 100% of those optional elements. I haven't gotten my test scores. What can I do? I haven't even gotten my recommendations. My counselor, is just nowhere to be found. And this does happen, actually. I haven't gotten my test scores. I haven't gotten my recommendations in just yet. Can I still submit my application? Yeah, you can submit your applications as long as you fill out the essays and you punch in all the information, all that sort of stuff. It's fine. And then you'll just put in like a test identification number, and the scores will be sent, right? The test boards and all that kind of stuff. Your school counselor will send all that stuff. So that's not your responsibility. You're not in charge of that. Okay, so you're in charge of the application. You can submit it. Here's a big one. Can I break my early decision offer? This is not exactly smiled upon, and the quick answer is yes. If you're going to go to the UK, all right. So what can happen is if you break your ED, it's kind of like a contract, but it's not like a legally binding contract per se. But what they can do, the school, is, especially if they really wanted you to come, they can sort of like blacklist you, and they can sort of inform the other schools, hey, this person kind of broke free of the ED agreements. We would appreciate if you sort of didn't accept them, and they can do that. If you want to break your ED and go to another U.S. school, is it possible? Yes, it's still possible. What do? Really communicate with the school. Okay? Call, write, show up in person, speak with the dean of admissions, and explain yourself. Okay? They can choose to release you from this, right? They can choose to say, hey, you know what? You've explained it. No, it's not a big deal. We've got a huge applicant pool. Whatever. It's okay. They can choose to release you. If you're going to the UK, they would still very much appreciate this, but it is very, 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 very unlikely that they even know you're applying to the UK or know what you're doing. So do your thing. For the UCAS, do I need to choose all my schools and courses at once? No, not really. If you're doing the Oxbridge, for example, you can actually submit those Oxbridge ones earlier, and you can pick the other 4 courses, 4 schools later on. So no, you don't need to do them all at once, which is it's a load off. That can be very stressful. What are conditional or unconditional offers? This is another question I do hear a lot. Conditional offers are like, okay, hey, Emerson, thanks for your application. Good stuff. We would like to give you a conditional offer. So what we want you to do is, here's your current score, here are your current scores right now. We would really appreciate if you actually get these scores and you meet these conditions to attend school. For IB students, on the whole, it's like an increase of like 2 or 3 points in your IB. So that means if you were predicted like a 5, you want to get a 6 for a couple of courses. If you're predicted a 6, you're going to try to push it up to a 7, so in a couple of courses. So, you know, that's a conditional offer. An unconditional offer is the opposite. An unconditional offer is you're in. And for high school students, you can, you know, talk about it with mom and dad. You can quit. You can become, you know, you can realize your dream of becoming a high school dropout. You know, like all the cool kids, right? You can leave high school, skip your IBs if you don't want to do your exams, this sort of thing. I really wouldn't recommend it. I mean, especially if you're thinking about grad school, you want to make sure that you've got, you know, a high school diploma for the most part and have your final grades and all that sort of stuff. But unconditional offer means exactly that. Barring some sort of police chase that you get yourself into, you know, and some sort of legal, you know, issues that you might get into, you're fine, and that's an unconditional. But what if you don't get either? What if nobody wants to hang out with you? Well, that's where clearing comes. It's called clearing, and this is something I was mentioning earlier that you might be interested in. Clearing is it's everybody's sort of parachute. So it's in case of emergency. The UCAS will allow you to go into what they call clearing, where you can basically apply to, okay, they've given all the offers and people have accepted or denied, there are remaining places, okay? And then that will put you in the running for those remaining places to some of the schools. So you can still very well get into some of the top schools and sign up for those courses, worst case scenario. And you can continue to apply to different schools well into the summer in July. Again, you don't start until October. So July is not even too late for the UCAS. And that's what clearing is known as. So thank you so much, guys, for coming. I really do appreciate that. Thanks for taking the time to listen. I hope that answers the vast majority of questions. But I'm happy to talk about anything else that might be on your minds. So anything else that you guys are wondering? Anything about the US side, UK side, anything in general? Yeah, what's up?
Is it normal for people to apply for both US and UK?
Totally normal, yeah, because you're going to get that 10. You're going to get the 10. And again, it's just that 1 for the UK, right? It's the 1 for the UK, so you've got 9 others just kind of collecting dust from your school counselor. And it's also a really nice way to take risks with your school choices. If you are saying like, hey, listen, I really want to go to the UK, I don't want to go to the US, for my personal reasons, I don't want to go, or vice versa. So what you do is just apply anyway and take some risks. You might surprise yourself, you might get in, and then that could completely change your plans there. So there's really no good reason not to. Other than laziness, I mean, you can hang out and just binge some Netflix. That would be cool. Order a pizza or something. Yeah, but other than that, no real good excuse for not to. So I would highly recommend it. It's a little extra effort, a little bit more sweat and tears, but yeah.
Also, I know that when you get your references,
Yeah.
it's usually like they change. Well, the people give the references usually change just for like US and UK.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So do you only get one reference instead for both?
So you won't really see what they say about you.
But you only have one.
Yeah, you just get these references. Yeah, and then the referees are required to sign in. They'll have profiles. They'll submit everything for you. So a more important thing is actually choosing your referees. Choose people who you're really cool with, who you can almost guarantee will just write you an incredible recommendation. And it proves, because part of the recommendation will say, how long have you known this person actually? You don't want it to be like, oh, I met him once at a summer camp for like 3 days. We were at the same lunch table. You want to make sure that it's somebody who's been a part of your life, because they will actually, and you'll see like, some unis will make this stuff public. They'll actually underline and circle and read through these recommendations and treat them as if they're a personal statement. They really get into them with a microscope. So yeah, choose those people wisely. Choose friends that you've known academic friends, coaches, teachers, administrators, and those people that you've known, the longer the better. Yeah, hey, sorry.
For the academic schools,
Yeah.
2 questions.
For the academics, UK?
US.
US, okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
First one, because my daughter is taking IB,
Okay.
so US schools are looking at the past 4 years academic performance, right? So are there any weightings like IB?
Okay.
Which one weighs the most important one?
Which system, like IB or A levels or something like this?
Because the first 2 years
Mhm.
is IGCSE and then
IB.
IB.
Yeah.
So the past 4 years, yeah. So they have like the final scores.
Oh, how do they weight those years? Yeah.
Yeah.
So typically you want to see an upward trend. So I work with a lot of students who, in freshman year of high school, they played a lot of World of Warcraft, League of Legends, and they just devoted hundreds of hours to online video gaming. And their grades in grade 9 were not so good. But then they realized, okay, I need to start taking my grades a little bit more seriously. And so what they want to see is just sort of an upward trend. So if you started off slower, there could be a number of reasons why your grades aren't so amazing in grade 9. You're really young, right? You're really young. But they want to see you can still get into top schools with that upward trajectory. As far as and so that really means junior year, senior year are the more important ones, right? To make sure that you either stay or improve, maintain or improve. But as far as the IB is actually one of the most well-respected systems in the whole world right now. And they really do value IB. Right? They know that they're challenging. They know that they're hard. The A levels, the A levels, for millions of years, the A levels have been the #1 go-to for administrators. They're sort of losing their favor for the most part. The A levels and the IGCSEs they're going through continual redesigns, and a lot of people are confused about what the IGCSEs are now, and there's a lot of debate and stuff. So the IB is kind of like supplanting those systems, broadly speaking. So they are hard, but they will help you out.
And second one, because for IB students,
I got you going.
for IB students to have SAT or ACT is really tough.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of time to
And the
study.
SAT, they have SAT 1 and SAT 2 subjects.
Subject test, yes.
Yeah. So do subject tests, are subject tests a must for most of the
For most, no. No, not for most. It's just your school and your course. And so you want to make sure that you get your research done and see those requirements. Because they might actually require a math subject test or just any subject test. You can choose, like, we want to have 2 or 3 subject tests, these sorts of things. But for the majority, no, you do not need the subject test. But they look good. They do look good. And if you want to choose some, you can submit them. And even for the UK guys, you don't have to do the SAT, the ACT, but you can actually submit these scores if you like. It's just, again, another opportunity for you to show, your academic perceptions. Oh, exactly. Yeah, a little bit more.
So if you're doing SAT 2, do you mean averagely do 2 subjects?
A lot of people choose 2. Yes. Yes, on average 2. Yeah,
Thank
good.
you.
Hey, what's up?
For applying for the US,
Yeah.
is it better for IB English, is it better to study English? Is it better to study English only because they want more rigorous?
100%. I would never say that English B is the best choice, especially coming out of Hong Kong. They really want you to prove, because language is one of those things that actually is sort of linked to your actual thinking processes, right? Language represents our thoughts and our evidence, our proof of our critical thinking abilities and the level that we can interpret and understand highly challenging, highly complex or specific elements within our subjects, are majors in college. So if you can choose, I would highly recommend just choosing English A, but choose SL. Even if you're having trouble, choose a standard level English. But English B, English B, and I love the IB, and the IB people, I love you, but English B is really not that a comprehensive learning program. I mean, it's kind of similar to like a TOEFL junior. It's like a middle school kind of level reading. Now, for a lot of people, that's challenging, especially if English is your second language, third language, or whatever. But right now, even just speaking with you, you should not be taking English B. Even if you get like a top score in it, it won't give you that benefit that you're looking for. I mean, and then some schools won't even really. I mean, if you're looking for HLs and SLs, they won't even really value that at all. So, better to choose, Chinese B or Spanish B or something else for a language.
Is it necessary to take the IELTS?
Okay, it depends on a couple things. It depends if you have a U.S. passport, like one of these passports, you do not need to take the IELTS. Also, if you've been studying at an English-speaking school for, I believe it's 5 years, you do not need to take the IELTS. But if you have not, if you switch from a local school to an international school, you might need to take the IELTS. Yeah, so it really depends personally. Yeah. Okay, question.
So we talked about SATs.
Yeah, sure.
So is that like an outline for a digital part that falls on a level to the SATs?
Oh, coming from A levels to the SAT, it's a lot of reading. It's a lot of reading and math. That's about it. So it's grammar stuff. How to use a comma, how to use a semicolon, that sort of stuff, which is memorizable. And then it's understanding, like, what's the main idea of this story? What does this vocabulary word mean in this sentence? So it's not, I think a lot of, when people hear, yeah, exactly. So when people hear the SAT, they sort of cower in fear and say, oh, no, I don't want to do that. It's a lot of the stuff that you've already been doing for the most part, even in the A level. So it's not some totally foreign concept outside of the curriculum. It overlaps no matter what you're doing, even if it's APs in HKIS, a US system, or A levels in the UK system. So it is very doable. And I would recommend for anybody to just do a diagnostic test. Just do it once. See where you stand. It'll take 3 hours and 50 minutes of your time. I know it's a big test. It's big. It takes a little under 4 hours. But it's English and math. That's it. And even for the math, compared to a lot of the stuff that people learn in Hong Kong, math is, the 99th percentile of test scorers is really high, because for the most part, the math is straightforward. Yeah. So yeah, really good question. I think especially if you're saying like, I want to do UK, here's one of the barriers, maybe. Not so much as you think. Not so much as you think. You can get it done once. A lot of silent dates. Yeah.
Do they mark it down for English as opposed to American?
Oh, good question. The spellings, yeah, the spellings are there. I'll tell you one thing. They do. There's no the spellings. No. If you're writing an essay, no, they won't mark you down for color with a U, right? Something like this, and that doesn't matter at all. I will say the only real difference is that there's the, if you go to the Oxford comma, it'll be X, comma, Y, comma, and Z. Z, right? So there's actually the 2 commas in the list, not just the 1. That's really the biggest difference. But other than that, no. There's no American English, British English difference there. So you would not be at a disadvantage at all there. Yeah. No, good question. Is it anything else for you guys that sort of answer all your questions? Yeah, all good? Cool. Okay guys, thank you so much for coming. I really do appreciate it. If you guys do have any other questions, I'll hand you each. Here is one of my cards. Please feel free to email me at any point. And my WhatsApp is actually on the right-hand side too, so feel free to message, email. And of course, these guys are always here for any other questions as well. We've got our website and everything that you guys might need to. Oh, there you go. No problem.